Okay, so hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Siti Akila binti Mama Asri. My ID number is 012025091997. Regarding this mini project applied chemistry or presentation, I will tell you guys about the introduction. Okay, so first of all, what is carbohydrate? Carbohydrate is actually an organic compound that is made by CHNO element in the ratio of 1 to 2 to 1 with the general formula of CH2O. The carbohydrate is classified into three classes, which is known as monosaccharide, disaccharide, and polysaccharide. First of all, monosaccharide act as a monomer of the carbohydrate, which cannot be hydrolyzed into much more smaller units, and it will contain either aldehyde group or ketone group. These two groups' presence will be determined by the number of carbon of their functional group is located. For example, for aldehyde, the functional group will be located at the carbon number 1 with the group of CHO. But for ketone, their functional group will be at the carbon number 2 of this C double bond O. All of these type of monosaccharides are considered as reducing sugar as they can reduce another chemical in a reaction. It includes glucose, fructose. Okay, so let's move on to the next group of carbohydrate, which is also known as disaccharide. Disaccharides is a type of carbohydrate where two molecules of monosaccharides bind together by glycosidic bond. It is through condensation process of adding the water into the molecules. For example, the most popular one is the glucose, with glucose via glycosidic bond to produce maltose. So the last classification of carbohydrate is polysaccharide. Polysaccharide is actually known also as complex sugar as it is made of more than 10 monosaccharides. It is also have more complex structure and it is also binded together with glycosidic bond and also hydrogen bond altogether. For example, it includes glycogen, which is energy storage in the human body, and also chitin, which is an important carbohydrate for the animal's body, especially for insects. Okay, so now let's talk about the types of carbohydrate in our daily life. What's the difference between types of carbohydrate and the classification of carbohydrate I told you just now? The classification mainly involves the structure of the carbohydrate, while the types of carbohydrate actually tells more about types of carbohydrate. So for an example is the simple sugar. Simple sugar is actually considered as sweet and simple carbohydrate because they are usually made by monosaccharide and disaccharide. The example of it is sugars in fruits like fructose in grapes and honey and milk and sugar. So this type of sugar are easily consumed by the humans. Next is starch. Starch is actually considered as complex carbohydrate as it is a polysaccharide, which is made of many types of monosaccharide units as discussed before. And it's also digestible. This is because the starch is actually made of polysaccharide, which is binded by hydrogen bonds and glycosidic bonds. Those bonds can be digested in our body with our specific kind of enzymes. So lastly is the fibers. Fibers actually divided into two classes, which is soluble and insoluble. But both of these types are considered as indigestible because our body doesn't have their specific enzyme to digest it. It also mostly found in plants because it is usually found in the cellulose, which is a cell wall of a plant, like vegetables like sawi and kangkong. The soluble type of fiber can be digested by fermentation by the good bacteria in our guts. Okay, so how about the carbohydrate in our human environment? We have three main points to be discussed. First, as mentioned before, the carbohydrate is actually influences global nutrition and food security because many countries in the world consume carbohydrate as their majority diet, such as rice, corn, potatoes, pastas, and all. Okay, so the next one is the environmental impact. Actually, because of many types of carbohydrates are planted in the earth, it contributes to the release of greenhouse gases, causes high water consumption, and also causes soil and water pollution. The greenhouse gases are actually mainly because of the use of fertilizers that can release nitrogen oxide, and also the paddy rice fields will also release methane gas. Other than that, the high water consumption actually also causes by the crops like paddy and rice, and because it needs flood of water for them to grow. So the last one, it actually causes soil and water pollution. This is because, as mentioned before, when the pesticide or inorganic fertilizers are used, it will damages the lands and the water underneath the ground. So the last one is the sustainability. This is because actually carbohydrate is actually a renewable source and they can be transformed into many types of eco-friendly materials like biofuels, biodegradable plastics, and even compost. Actually, in the human environment, it will be explained more by my other friends later. The last one is the relationship of carbohydrate and our subject, which is applied chemistry. Carbohydrate have their own specific structure, chemical reaction, and functional properties, thus making them useful for many other functions. Let's start with the structure and its reactivity. As mentioned before, the carbohydrate have many different structures like monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Even within two disaccharides, both of the molecules will not be in the same structure. This brings us to the example of monosaccharides that will react quickly while polysaccharides will react more slowly. This is because polysaccharides have hydrogen bond, which is harder to be broken down, while monosaccharide only have glycosidic bond and easily to be broken down. So this type of bond determine their reactivity in their reactions. So this brings us to the next subtopic, which is the chemical reaction. Because carbohydrate actually involved in many important chemical reactions such as hydrolysis, because as we know, the polysaccharides could be broken down to disaccharides and monosaccharides by the hydrolysis process by removing water molecules. So the next one is oxidation. This is considered as important because it helps to release ATP from the glucose process in the cellular respiration. This is the same considered for the fermentation because, as mentioned before, there are crops like paddy and wheat and rice that release methane gas, because the methane gas is produced by the fermentation that causes the release of so many greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. And the last one is the isomerization, which means the rearranging structure of sugars to create different functional products. So, for an example, in the Krebs cycle, from citrate, it is isomerized into isocitrate. And lastly is functional properties. In this part, I will only tell you guys 4, but there is actually tons of functional properties of carbohydrate that is used nowadays. So first one is the thickening and gelling ability. This helps to add food texture and also make up texture in our daily life. Why this could happen? Because carbohydrate actually have branching structure that form networks. So this network create the gel-like medium for the products to be thickened. So the next one is biodegradability. As mentioned before, carbohydrate is actually a renewable sources, so it can be used to make paper bag, compostable drinking straws, and many other things. This is because carbohydrate only have glycosidic bond that can be broken down easily and it doesn't release any toxic waste. So the next one is the adhesive properties, like glue and stickers that we use in our classroom. Actually, when the glue is applied on a paper, the amylose and amylopectin from the glue is reacting with the fiber of paper to form hydrogen bond. Thus, that's what made the paper could stick together. And the last one is the structural support. Some of the carbohydrate includes hydrogen bonds, which is actually strong enough between their chains to create rigid and stable fibers. So because of this, we can create wood furniture and even coated clothing to be used in our daily life. That's all for today. My name is Siti Akila and that is all from my part.
Hi, my name is Kirtana Raja and I am going to explain about the carbohydrates in human diet. So, carbohydrates are the primary source of energy in the human diet. So, they provide 4 calories energy per gram. So, in carbohydrates, glucose is the main fuel for the brain and the nervous system. So, it helps to maintain normal blood glucose level. It's stored as a glycogen in the liver and the muscle for a quick energy. So carbohydrates is important for physical activity and metabolic functions. So dietary fiber, a carbohydrate, improves digestion and gut health. So fiber helps to prevent constipation, supports healthy gut bacteria. So complex carbohydrates provides vitamins, minerals and antioxidants. So it helps to regulate cholesterol level and reduce heart risk diseases. So carbohydrates like low glycemic index help to control diabetes and obesity. There are many examples of carbohydrates. For an example, cereals, which is basically we known as a rice, and fruits, vegetables, legumes, tuber, which is known as the potato, and lactose, which also known as the milk. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kesha and I'll be explaining on the environmental chemistry applications of carbohydrates. In my case, I picked biofuels. So Carbohydrates are the main renewable feedstock for bioethanol because they can be converted into fermentable sugars that microbes will turn into ethanol. So before we go into the conversion pathway of how the carbohydrates turn into biofuel, we'll have to know the main sources for this process to happen. So first it will be sugars. So some sugars that they use are sugar cane and sugar beet. So why they use sugars is because sugars are easy to ferment. Next we have starches. So we have they use starches like corn, starch sources from corn or wheat, and these starches must be broken down. And lastly, the carbohydrate used will be lignocellulose, which are present in rice straw and wood residue. So now that we know the sources of where the carbohydrates are taken from for this biofuel process, we will go into the conversion pathway of how carbohydrates turn into biofuel. So firstly, they will undergo pre-treatment. So this mainly is for 2G sugars like lignocellulose, and this pre-treatment helps to open up the plant fiber structure. So the next process will be hydrolysis. So in hydrolysis, there are enzymes that will help convert the starch or cellulose into simple sugars. The third step would be fermentation. So in fermentation, there are yeast and certain bacteria that will help to convert the sugars into ethanol and carbon dioxide. Lastly, there's distillation and dehydration, and this last process purifies the ethanol to make it fuel grade. So that's all for the pathway. Lastly, I will be explaining about the benefits of the biofuel. So biofuels, since they use sources from sugarcane, sugar beet, corn, wheat, rice straw and wood residue, it becomes a renewable liquid fuel which is blendable with gasoline. The next benefit would be 2G carbs use agricultural waste, which lowers the food versus fuel pressure. Lastly, this entire process has a high conversion efficiency, which turns sugar into ethanol. So that's all from me.
Hello, my name is Nimarna, and my part is the conclusion. In conclusion, carbohydrates are organic compounds made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, with the general formula of C, H2, and O, with the ratio of 1:1 of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They can be classified into monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides, with the types such as supersugar for monosaccharides, fiber for disaccharide, and starch for polysaccharides. They are to undergo chemical reaction like hydrolysis, oxidation, fermentation, and isomerization. They also serve important functional roles such as thickening, gelling, being biodegradable, and providing structural support. Carbohydrates also play a major role in biofuel production through pretreatment, hydrolysis, fermentation, and distillation, offering benefits such as renewability, use of agricultural waste, and high conversion efficiency. In the human body, carbohydrates are the primary energy source, with glucose being an essential for the brain and the nervous system. Finally, they influence our global diets, the impact on our environment, and sustainability, showing how carbohydrates connect chemical, energy, the environment, and human health. Thank you.